Okay, welcome everyone to another random walk down Mill Street. Thank you for tuning in. Tonight we're going to listen to some of the music of Samuel de Sola. And some of the music of Samuel de Sola you probably know without realizing who the composer was, and some of it you don't. And I don't know how many of you know about his life at all and his many relations. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to share my screen, and I don't think it's going to be quite as long as some of the previous presentations. So we'll see by the end. Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure that you can see the screen. That's a yes. You can see my my slideshow. I don't see any responses. Thumbs up. Yes. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, let me make this smaller. Okay. For whatever reason, it doesn't want to get small on my screen. Okay, that should be a little better. Okay, I started with a pasuk, just to give it a title. V'hana'ar Shmuel Misharet et Hashem. It's a verse from Book of Samuel, right, where Samuel the prophet, you know, his origin story is quite interesting. At a young age, he's promised to the temple. His mother brings him to Eli, and he works in the temple. And the reason that I chose this title is because of the story of Samuel de Sola. Samuel de Sola was the son of Reverend David Aaron, D.A. de Sola, who was pretty famous and loomed large in the history of the Spanish-Portuguese community of London, of Bevis Synagogue. And he dies, I think, in 1860, 1859, 1860. And his youngest son, Samuel de Sola, becomes the Chazan after him. It's a very short tenure. He dies 6 years later. I don't think he was even 27 years old. So he had a short life dedicated to the synagogue. So that's why I gave him Misharet et Hashem. He was a young man who was dedicated to Bevis Synagogue in London. So why are we talking about it here? And that is my first slide. When we get to listen to some of the music, you'll understand better. But the first slide is a wedding announcement in the Hebrew Standard, a Jewish newspaper from 1917, and it reads the following: the wedding of Miss Tamar Hershenson to Reverend Dr. David de Sola Poole was celebrated on Tuesday afternoon, February 6th, at the Synagogue of the Spanish-Portuguese Congregation Shereth Israel, 70th Street in Central Park West, right here, in the presence of a gathering which completely filled the synagogue. The ceremony was performed by Rabbi Chaim Hershenson, the father of the bride, and Reverend H. Pereira Mendes, the Chazan of the minister of Shereth Israel. The ceremony was followed by the choir singing melodies composed by Reverend D.A. de Sola, the great-grandfather of the groom, the Reverend Samuel de Sola, the great-uncle of the groom, a setting to the 23rd Psalm by Reverend H. Pereira Mendes, a cousin of the groom, and a Baruch Haba on a setting of the 128th Psalm, that's Baruch Haba, composed by the groom, especially for the occasion. Now, of these melodies, I'm pretty sure I know all of them, with the exception of the last. I do not know Dr. Poole's own composition for Baruch Haba, so maybe one day we'll have another class where we listen to the compositions of Dr. David de Sola Poole. Nevertheless, this little snippet, this little social news item about the wedding of David de Sola Poole intrigues me, because not only did he get married, but he had a little concert of melodies from his own family. And as you saw, they are they're no slouches. Some of the best music, some of the most well-known music of our tradition is represented here, especially David D.A. de Sola and Henry Mendes. And when I say our tradition, I mean here in Sheretz Israel. These are some of the more famous pieces, which we're going to get to in a little later. On your right, you'll see David de Sola Pool and Tamar Hershenson. This is not their wedding picture. They are. This is like around the 1940s or so. But I couldn't have a wedding picture, so that was the best I could do. And on the left, you'll see this is David de Sola Pool. This is his son Ithiel de Sola Pool, his father Eliezer de Sola Pool, Elazar de Sola Pool, and his grandfather, whose name was Solomon Pool. Solomon Pool, Elazar Pool, David de Sola Pool, Ithiel de Sola Pool. There's 4 generations. And the reason I have this picture here is because this is David de Sola Pool's grandfather. I don't have a picture of his grandmother, but David de Sola Pool's grandmother was a woman named Sarah de Sola, who was the daughter of D.A. de Sola of London. We're going to see some of the family relationships later, but that is his grandfather's father-in-law was the composer and the minister of Bevis Marx, David Aaron de Sola, which makes his great uncle the Reverend Samuel de Sola, who we're going to talk about today. Okay, starting with David Aaron de Sola. Who was David Aaron de Sola? He was the minister of Bevis Marx in London, the Spanish-Portuguese community in London. And I think the easiest way to get a summary of his life is to read his obituary. So we're going to read his obituary. This comes from the Occident. That's the Jewish newspaper that was published in Philadelphia by Isaac Leeser, but was basically the main Jewish newspaper of the middle of the 19th century in America, especially for those who were traditional or Orthodox. There were some other reform-oriented ones, but the main one, the most widely read Jewish newspaper of the time, was the Occident, and this was an obituary following the death of David Aaron de Sola. We regret to see the announcement of the decease of the Reverend David A. de Sola, father of the talented Dr. Abraham de Sola of Montreal, who we'll talk about maybe a little later. Maybe you'll get a whole nother class another day. This sad event occurred at London, England, where Mr. de Sola was the first chazan of the Shar HaShamayim Synagogue on the 29th of October of 1860. Mr. de Sola was married to a daughter of the late Rabbi Raphael Meldola. That's Reverend Meldola, a pretty famous minister in his own right in Bevis Marx, and was himself a man of great erudition. Besides numerous sermons and fugitive publications, he edited works of great magnitude. He assisted Dr. Raphael, now of New York, in translating the 18 treatises of the Mishnah, which was published by Mr. Elkin in London. So that was the without the consent of his author. That's a little interesting publishing history, but the first English translation of the Mishnah was done by David Aaron de Sola. And then he translated Genesis, and he made the Sephardic Siddur, the Ashkenazic Siddur. And then it says, on the whole, Mr. de Sola was a native of Holland who wrote good English, was one of the most laborious of our literary men. He wrote a lot. We see his age stated at 64 years. We thought he was older. Anyone would offer or confer, I don't know, something is missing here, on us a great favor to furnish us the full account of Mr. de Sola's life and labors, for such as he are men belonging to all Israel, not alone to the city or country where they live. Meaning, he doesn't have any good biography, so if you have one, send it to Mr. Leeser. It'll be a difficult matter to supply his place, even with the large field of selection open to the oldest Portuguese synagogue in the British dominions, meaning no one can take his place. For though we were personally unacquainted with him, we may freely state that his reputation was one which will confer honor on his name. May his memory be blessed. That is the obituary of Isaac Leeser for David Aaron de Sola. He writes here that, he wants to see a biography. Biography actually was written by Abraham de Sola, his son, several years after this. So you could find out more about his life and about him. But this class is not about David Aaron de Sola. But I need to talk about him a little bit so that you can get a sense of who his children were and some of his other relations. So we started mentioning a few of them already. His oldest daughter, he had 15 children, as you see here. Most of them lived to adulthood. A few of them died young, like Raphael de Sola, and I think Jacob de Sola died young. But many of them survived to adulthood. And the oldest of them was Sarah de Sola, who married a man named Solomon Poole, who was the grandparents of our late minister, David de Sola Poole. A few children down, you'll see Reverend Abraham de Sola. That's another child of David Aaron de Sola. He became the minister of the Portuguese synagogue in Montreal, also known as Shereth Israel. Now, if you go to Montreal, they don't use the name Shereth Israel. They call it the Spanish synagogue, which is Shereth Israel of Montreal. And Abraham de Sola was, along with Isaac Leeser, one of the major top Jewish ministers, rabbis in America in the middle of the 19th century. I think actually that he may have been the first Jewish minister to preach to open Congress. You know, he had an invocation. I'm not sure if he was the first, but certainly he was among the first. And that he's a Canadian rabbi, and to show you his fame, you know, he was invited by Congress to open up the session and give the invocation there. So that's Abraham de Sola. The other thing that Abraham de Sola is known for is he bought Leeser's Siddur after Leeser passed away, and he published with some updates the Portuguese Siddur after Leeser. You had the Abraham de Sola version. Now, Abraham de Sola also has a son. He has a couple of sons, one of whom is named Meldola de Sola, who we might talk about a little later. And he also became pretty famous rabbi towards the latter part of the 19th century. And he had another son named Clarence de Sola, who became very wealthy. We'll talk about him a little bit as well. So that's two children. Another child, skipping over 6, 7, and 8, is Eliza de Sola. Eliza de Sola marries another rabbi or chazan named Abraham Pereira Mendes, who was a rabbi in Birmingham, England, and then later in Newport, Rhode Island. And he was the father of our own minister here at Shereth Israel, Henry Pereira Mendes, as well as many other rabbis of the late 19th century, including Frederick de Sola Mendes and some others as well. So this is a very rabbinic or ministerial family that we're talking about here. We already have several rabbis or chazanim all descended from David Aaron de Sola. And then finally, again, skipping over 10, 11, 12, 13, his youngest son, Reverend Samuel de Sola, is who we're going to talk about, or who we're going to listen to tonight. So that is the family and the children and the descendants. I should mention, once I was talking about number 9, Eliza de Sola, who was the wife of Abraham Pereira Mendes, had several children, one of whom is the grandfather or great-grandfather of our own members, Joshua de Sola Mendes and Eliza de Sola Mendes, the grandparents of the grandfather of Colonel Jonathan Mendes. May he live and be well. I was going to say until 120, but the way he goes, keep going past. Who knows how long he'll go? Okay. So that is the family of David Aaron de Sola. As you see, a lot of members of that family took on prominent roles in the Spanish-Portuguese world, especially in America, but also in England. And so now that gives us a little background. Now, tonight's story. So here's some pictures of the people we just mentioned. Here is another picture of David Aaron de Sola. This is his son Abraham de Sola here. This is Eliza de Sola and Abraham Pereira Mendes. And this is I don't have a picture of Sarah, but this is Sarah's husband, Solomon Poole. And so just to show you, these are sort of legacies. from David Aaron de Sola, his son Abraham in Montreal, had his grandson was also the rabbi in Montreal, Meldola de Sola. His daughter married Abraham Pereira Mendy, who's a minister in Birmingham, England, as well as in London, as well as in Newport, Rhode Island. He has many children. One of them becomes a minister here at Sheretz Israel, Henry Pereira Mendes. Another daughter, his oldest daughter, married Poole, and his great-grandson became the minister here, David de Sola Poole. So yeah, you get a lot of Portuguese rabbis from this family. Okay. Now, the other thing that David Aaron de Sola is known for, aside from publishing the Siddur, translating the Mishnah, translating some of the Chumash, for the first time into English, was together with a composer named Emmanuel Aguilar, he published the music of the Spanish-Portuguese Jews in London. And this is probably the earliest, or among the earliest attempts to record the Spanish-Portuguese tradition. And so it is fundamental. It is really fundamental when you're talking about the music of the Spanish-Portuguese Jews to refer to the Ancient Melodies, which was a book published in 1857, towards the end of his life, with Emmanuel Aguilar. De Sola writes a long introduction about the music. Aguilar writes, notates all the music. And at the very end of the book, and so all of it is traditional melodies, ancient melodies that go back who knows how many generations, and then one modern composition left in at the very, very end as an appendix. And that modern composition was Adon Olam, which was written by David Aaron de Sola. This is probably the most famous Adon Olam in our tradition, known throughout the Jewish world, especially in the Commonwealth countries of the British Empire. But all over, everyone knows this melody. I'm going to play for you with one particular recording, which comes from the Carribean, which was recorded by Gideon Zelermyer. It's just an excerpt of it. Hope you enjoy. So that is the Adon Olam, the most famous Adon Olam. They took a little liberties with the ending. I know I see Solomon laughing. I think that was what he was laughing about. But that is the most famous Adon Olam from David Aaron de Sola, D.A. de Sola. But we're going to talk about de Sola's son's music, which is considerably less famous. And so let's see what we can glean from that. So my screen is a little frozen. I don't know what you see on your screen, but let's see if we can. See if I can do this again. Okay. Okay. Nope. Okay. What I want to show you today concerns the music of David Aaron's son, Samuel. And our starting point for talking about his music is going to be this letter, which was written in 1966 by Raphael de Sola of London, originally born in Montreal, to our minister, David de Sola Poole. And this is a letter I found among David de Sola Poole's papers in Sheretz Israel's archives. Dear David, first let me send you all the best wishes for Shabbonot. Also, thank you for your letter, the contents of which I have noted. Alfred Friedman, a person I don't know, has sent me a copy of the Sheretz Israel Bulletin for April, which contains your account of the Sabbath that you recently spent at Lauderdale Road. So in 1966, Dr. Poole took a trip to London. He wrote about what happened there in the Sheretz Israel Bulletin. That a copy of that bulletin goes back to London, where it's seen by his second or third cousin, Raphael de Sola. And this is what prompting the letter. My main object in writing is that I note that you say that the choir sang 2 hymns to melodies composed by D.A. de Sola, in Kelohenu and Adon Olam. No doubt. I was always under the impression that both of these melodies were composed by Samuel de Sola, his youngest son, who was Chazan at Bevis Marks and who died at an early age. Am I wrong? We all know D.A. de Sola's beautiful Adon Olam, but the march-like tune which they sang at Lauderdale Road, the Sabbath that you were there, meaning Raphael de Sola was there when he was there, and also the Kelohenu, I always thought were composed by Samuel de Sola. I am not aware that D.A. de Sola left any other compositions besides the well-known Adon Olam. Samuel de Sola also composed a Yigdal, which is sung in London, New York, and Montreal. And my father, that's Clarence de Sola, who is the son of Abraham de Sola of Montreal. And my father used to tell me that he composed a very fine Hashkibenu, but I have never heard it. Although David de Mesquita, someone in London, told me that he knew it, but it fell into disuse in London long before I came here. As far as I know, D.A. de Sola never composed anything else besides his Adon Olam. My grandfather, Abraham de Sola of Montreal, composed a very fine Hashkibenu, which is only known in Montreal. Of course, Meldola de Sola, that's his great uncle, the son of Abraham de Sola, that's his uncle, the son of Abraham de Sola, left a very great number of synagogue compositions, which are only known in Montreal. Some are very fine. I was told that Harry Mendes, who I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is the grandfather of Eliza de Sola Mendes of our synagogue, I could be wrong, would not sing Samuel de Sola's, or are you right in calling it D.A. de Sola's Adon Olam? Because he said that it was copied from a part of the Roman Catholic service. This is beyond my ability to research. I have no idea, but that's what he wrote. Kindest regards to Tamar and yourself. Sincerely, that is Raphael de Sola. P.S. My father and my uncle Meldola told me about a special Mizmor tune which was sung only on Rosh Hashanah and Kippur when the Sepharim were returned in Montreal during my grandfather Abraham de Sola's time. Both my father and uncle described it as a horrible tune, and he abolished it in favor of Moss's Mizmor LeDavid, which is in London is sung only on the eve of Shabbat Bereishit, etc. So there's more things to unpack from this letter, but this is a pretty good primary source about some of the musical heritage of Montreal, and also talks about Samuel de Sola, which is what we want to talk about tonight. In particular, his melody for Ein Kelohenu and his melody for Adon Olam and Yigdal. And he also mentions that there was something written Hashkibenu, which he's never heard. So that is from the Shearith Israel archives. So let's talk about Samuel de Sola. Once again, I have an obituary, this from 1866 in the Jewish Chronicle, which is the Jewish newspaper, the main Jewish newspaper of London. The late Reverend Samuel de Sola, on Sunday last, this is, I forgot exactly what the day, but the year is 1866. Amidst a large concourse of profoundly grieving persons were committed to the grave the earthly remains of a promising young minister who within the very few years he held office knew how to obtain the respect of all that knew him, the affection of his deeply mourning flock, and the friendship of all those who enjoyed an intimate intercourse with him. Samuel de Sola, when he expired after a few days of illness on the 6th instant, was not yet 27 years old. What rendered this premature bereavement particularly affecting, as if his young age was not enough, was the circumstance that while he was struggling with death in one room, his firstborn son saw the light of the world in an adjoining one. Life and death thus met, as it were, on the threshold of the same house. The deceased is described as having been exceedingly amiable, a doting husband, a sincere Jew. With true piety, he was resigned to his fate and had the satisfaction, before closing his eyes forever, to invoke God's blessing on the infant son, on the infant soon to be fatherless, and on the mother soon to be a widow, and to commit them to the care of heaven. He was an active member of several benevolent societies and also the Association of the Diffusion of Religious Knowledge, for whom he lectured on several occasions. May God send consolation to the mourners and endow them with strength to bear with resignation the heavy loss that has befallen them. Pretty terrible, sad story. Samuel de Sola's wife, whose name was Jemima, was pregnant and gave birth around the exact time, within a day or two of the death of Samuel de Sola. And their son is named Samuel de Sola Jr. Okay. So just before we get to the music, the Jewish Association for the Diffusion of Religious Knowledge, which was mentioned as being one of the organizations that Samuel de Sola was involved with, also was called the Chebra Marbitzei Torah, and they published educational material as well as had classes. I think they were attempting to fight the efforts of Christian missionaries, but maybe had other purposes as well. This organization became important in British Jewish education circles, later becoming the Jewish Religious Education Board, and I think it may even still exist today. I'm not sure about that, but that's the organization that Samuel de Sola was involved with, other than Bevis Marx and his family and his music. So now we're taking a look at something really interesting, also found in Shearith Israel's archives. And if there's one thing that outside of the story of Samuel de Sola himself to take note here, is that there are lots of things in Shearith Israel's archives that have nothing to do with the history of Shearith Israel in particular, but are still really important in the Spanish-Portuguese history story. And this is some of them. These are handwritten, notated music. And if you can see here, it says here, this is in the David de Sola Pool paper. It says the above is a copy from the original by the late Samuel de Sola, dated 1908. So Pool had made a copy of Samuel de Sola's music in 1908 and brought it with him to New York. It's in our archive. This is Ein Kelohenu. Here's Hashkibenu, 2 pages of Hashkibenu. Above is a copy of Hashkibenu written in a book belonging to the late Samuel de Sola Esquire. And here it is notated for us. There's a few other pages like this in the archives, all in the David de Sola Pool papers. And there's nothing like this anywhere else. When I found it, I sent it to a colleague of mine in London named Elliot Alderman, who used to be the choir master in Lauderdale Road and Bevis Marx, and the Chazan there as well. And he said this material is very interesting because they knew this melody here by Hashkivenu. They didn't know that it was attributed to Samuel de Sola. and they'd only had one line, the melody line. They didn't have four-part harmony. And so the fact that it was actually written in four-part harmony was a revelation, aside from the fact that we knew now who the author was. But that's all beside the point. I want to get to some more material. So just to show you what is the kinds of things that one can find in Sheretz Israel's archives. So the first melody we're going to listen to is probably the one that's most familiar to us here at Sheretz Israel. This is Yigdal. And here you can see this is the copy that Poole had, a written copy from it even has a date, May 2nd, 1861. Composed and arranged by Samuel de Sola, Yigdal Elohim Chai. This is here at Sheretz Israel's regular Friday evening melody. We sing this melody every Friday night. I think in London, this is used only on festivals, but in New York, we do it every Friday night. And here we'll listen to I think it's a 1950s era recording from London. The choir of Bevis Mark. Oops. I didn't mean to interrupt it, but there was a question about other women singing. No, it's boys, young boys. Let's see if we can get back to the. I guess that was it. Okay. I thought there was one more line. Now, that last bit, Meitim Michael, is not part of the Yigdal that we know. That's special for Simchat Torah, I think, in London. But the beginning of the melody is what we do here in Sheretz Israel every single week. Yigdal Elohim Chai ve'yishtabach. In fact, we use that melody to start the Zemirot on Shabbat morning. Tilat Adonai yedaber pi v'barech kol basar shem kodsho le'olam v'anged ואנחנו נברך יה, מעתה ועד עולם, hallelujah. And so we get to think of Samuel de Sola every single week, pretty much. Okay, let's see what here. Boys, yes. Okay, so that's the one that I thought most of you would know. The other ones, I'm not sure how much you know or not. Maybe you've heard them before, maybe not, but let's take a look. The next one I want to play for you is Kelohenu. And this, also, we have an original or a copy of the original by Samuel de Sola in the David de Sola Pool Papers in Sheretz Israel's archives. And this is not a melody that is sung regularly in New York. It's not part of the regular repertoire, although they do have the notations and have done it from time to time on rare occasions. But it is known in London a little more frequently. And the recording we're going to listen to was from a concert in 1984 at Bevis Synagogue. Now, if you recognize that melody, you would not be alone, because it does sound, at least it's part B, very, very, very familiar. And I want to see if I can, how many of you recognize the following? We got to get it up here for a second. I thought I had it open, but I closed it right before the class. Okay, here we are. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here with you. Just tell me, how close or how different do you think it sounds to the following?
En Kelohenu, en Adonenu, en Malkeinu, en Moshienu, mi Kelohenu, mi
So I don't know. There is a pretty close resemblance. Let's listen to Samuel de Sola again, shall we? This is the B part. It's the B Kelohenu. What do you think? Pretty close. Not exactly, but anyway, they come from the same time and place. So the Ashkenazic and Kelohenu is probably about 10 or 15 years earlier, composed in the 1840s, and this one is composed in around 1861 or 1862. So they're pretty close, and they both come from London. So whether Samuel de Sola had that air in his mind when he was composing his, I don't know, but they do have certain similarities in their tone. We'll listen to one more item before I dismiss you for this evening, and that is Adon Olam. And I have to apologize for you because I looked hard and up and down everywhere I could online, everywhere I could of all the recordings I knew. I don't know any recordings of Samuel de Sola's Adon Olam, but I do have a what they call a MIDI, a electronic playing of the notes for the Adon Olam, and this melody also is known in London, not frequently, not enough to be recorded apparently, and not very well known in New York, although it has been sung in New York as well from time to time, and we're going to listen to it right now. Okay, there's the Adon Olam. Okay, so that's my presentation for you tonight. Adon Olam. So we've sung it here maybe 3 or 4 times in the last 5 years. That's about it. Not even, probably three times. So it's not a very common melody. People, whenever the choir does it, the people don't really know how to sing along with it, but they get it by the end because it's relatively simple. And it's really, I like it a lot better than the Kelohenu. I don't know why. To my ear, much more aesthetic than the Kelohenu. But this is the one, the Adon Olam by Samuel de Sola, that according to Raphael de Sola is some kind of something from the Roman Catholic rite. I have no idea how to even research that at all. Doesn't sound Roman Catholic to me, so I would tend to doubt it, but who knows. That's my presentation for you. So the last thought I'm going to leave you with is, so Samuel de Sola had one son. His name was Samuel de Sola Jr. As far as I know, Samuel de Sola Jr. did not have any children. And so this family, this particular line of the family does not continue to this day. But this music can and does. And the Yigdal we sing all the time. But I'd like to try to get some of those others better known, because this is his legacy. A young man who died young, had a real fine ear and real fine music, and I'd like people to know it. So that's what your job is, to know these melodies and to spread them, and maybe we can use them in the synagogue a little more frequently so that we don't have to, what is that, next time we hear it? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. I'm going to let everyone chat.